that open adoption is about meeting the child's needs, not the adults. Hello and welcome, ladies. If you are one of my wonderful subscribers, welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Jax, and on this channel, I fill you guys in on my IVF journey, my infertility journey, my adoption journey, whatever I happen to be going through that day. And in today's video, we're going to talk about open, closed, and semi-open adoptions. First, I'm going to go over what the definitions of those three things are in 2019, and then I'm going to go over the most recent research and studies available to us around the effects of those different types of adoption. If you want to just stick around for the definitions of those three, that's no worries, just please hit that like button on your way out. If you want to learn more about adoption, go ahead and click on the link above so that you can check out my other videos on adoption. And of course, if you want to join our family here, hit that subscribe button down below. Alright, let's start with some simple definitions. Closed adoptions, which were very prevalent prior to the 1980s, are when there's no permanent contact between the birth family and the adoptive family. There may have been some information exchanged at the time of adoption on location or medical history, but all of this is going to be non-identifying and not allow for any communication between parties after the initial exchange. Closed adoptions are also known as confidential adoptions, in case you see those terms used interchangeably. Semi-open adoptions are the next step up in openness from closed adoptions. They allow for some exchange of information ongoing. Usually this is facilitated through the adoption agency. Examples of information that might be exchanged are general well-being checkups, some photos, and medical history that becomes available after the placement. Usually any identifying information is still held private at this time, so that there can't be any contact outside of the agency or outside the chosen channel. Another chosen channel of information exchange might be an email specifically set up to facilitate this communication, but most people choose to go through the adoption agency as an ongoing service provided by them. Open adoption is anything above the communication level of semi-open adoption. This can include letters, texts, pictures, videos, phone calls, visits, anything above and beyond the basics of here's a few photos and maybe an email or two is when we get into the range of open adoption. Obviously, there's a little bit of a gray line there, but usually people call things an open adoption when identifying information has been exchanged, when they now know where you live and your full names or have your real email address or phone number. Adoption agencies will still facilitate these communications if you want, even with identifiable information provided. This is to provide a third-party supervisor of sorts for visits or letters or exchanges to make sure that everything is running smoothly and nothing needs to be changed in your open adoption plan. Now that you know some basics about what closed, semi-open, and open mean, let's look at some of the studies that have gone on around the consequences of choosing those different types of adoptions. I'm going to be quoting things from the year 2010 or sooner, but I also looked at studies that happened in the 1990s and early 2000s. I mention this because those studies have very different results than the more modern studies. I mention this just in case you do your own research and you find some studies that are radically different than these results. Make sure to check what year you are reading a study from. A University of Minnesota study found that birth mothers in fully open adoptions had a much lower rate of grief and loss compared to closed adoptions. And while there was no direct correlation between serious mental health issues and open or closed, there was a significant difference in the amount of satisfaction that a birth mother felt by the time that child had reached adolescence in an open adoption. This study also looked at the adoptive parent side of things. Parents in open adoptions fared much better than those in closed adoptions. Those in open adoptions generally reported higher levels of acknowledgement of adoption, empathy towards birth parents, and a stronger sense of the permanence of their relationship with their children. It later goes on to mention this is partially because there was just more opportunities to talk about adoption and the adoption process and their birth parents when you have an active relationship with them. Adoption never gets kind of sidelined or forgotten about because it's a important day-to-day part of your life if you're having conversations with the birth parents. They looked at both adoptive parents and birth parents 6 to 9 months out and found that both parties were much more satisfied with open adoption than their closed adoption counterparts. Now, this is the part that I found the most interesting. They divided the adoptive children up into 2 groups, those that were ages 4 through 12 and then 12 to 20. And they found that the children didn't have a significant statistical difference in happiness or self-awareness or self-image in the younger group. But by the time these children had reached adolescence, the story was way different. Those that were in an open adoption had a much higher rate of mutual respect, empathy, and valuing relationships, as well as a much easier time building up their own self-identity. This finding was backed up by a University of Sydney study published in 2018. They stated that contact with birth family members can serve to facilitate the formation of adoptive identity. They also stated that the level of openness wasn't exactly critical in this finding, but rather the amount of information that was available to them. Obviously, having an open adoption gives them the greatest flow of information, but the study stated that if for some reason the adoptive family had a significant amount of information around the birth family's status and occupation and identity, that was just as good for building up the adoptive child's identity. The Evan B. Donaldson Adoptive Institute found that adoptive parents and birth parents alike reported more positive experiences with open adoption. Specifically, women who have placed their infants for adoption through open adoption report less grief, regret, and worry, and more peace of mind. This jives really well with the idea that if you have visibility into your child's life and you know they're being taken care of, you can have a better long-term satisfaction with that decision, knowing that they weren't just placed for adoption and then you don't get to find out anything else about them, that you're trusting that the agency found someone that was appropriate to raise your child. You can have daily validation that that was a positive, good choice for that child. There's also the practicality of just having an ongoing medical record available. Obviously, when women place their child for adoption, they might not know all of the conditions that are going to plague them later in life that might be hereditary, and having that open channel of communication allows them to let you know should a history of heart disease or high blood pressure emerge within their family while you're raising that child. Another study I read by Dr. Harold Groviton debunked the theory that a level of openness somehow confuses the child and it's better to have them just have one set of parents like a traditional family. None of the data shows that there's any negative effect to having both adoptive parents and birth parents in the picture from the beginning. And I wanted to leave you with this quote from an article from adoptivefamilies.com. Most importantly, experts say biological and adoptive parents must remember that open adoption is about meeting the child's needs, not the adults'. Openness does not simply wipe away the feelings of grief or fear or insecurity that swirl around adoptive placement. Adoption is a story of grief and joy, and there's no escaping that dichotomy. It is going to be one of the most heart-wrenching days for that birth mother to place her child for adoption, no matter how appropriate and mature that decision is. And it's also going to be a moment of joy for that adoptive family to get that child, but those emotions are intermixed, and you can't go through an adoption without feeling the sadness for that mother and the choice that she's had to make because of the season of life she's in. So we talk about openness, and it's truly great by all accounts, by all studies, but we also need to remember that it does not wipe away the fear and grief and uncertainty that surrounds this situation. It just makes the longer term emotions better for everyone involved. But in that moment, those feelings of uncertainty and fear are still going to be there. And as prospective adoptive parents, everyone needs to be very conscientious of that. I hope you found some of this information helpful. If you did, please leave a like. If you want more information, I'll link the playlist down in the description below. But until next time, ladies, keep on fighting.